Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Know Gavin. Today I'm gonna expose myself as a liar. No, I kid. This video is going to go through some books that I've rated 5 stars that I don't actually think I believe they're 5 stars, but I've given them 5 stars for a certain reason. I don't know about you guys, but I have 5-star books and then I have 5-star books, you know what I mean? Like the 5 stars that I've given 5 stars, but aren't really technically 5 stars. We've all done it, I'm pretty sure. Okay, I'm not the only liar on BookTube, okay? But yeah, this video is going to go through several, I think I've only got about 6 or 7 books that I want to talk about and why I've given them 5 stars, even though I don't believe they deserve the 5 stars I've given them. But before we continue, don't forget to leave this video a like if you enjoy it and subscribe if you haven't already, and I would really appreciate it. So one of the first books that I thought of when I thought of doing this video was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And when I say Little Women, I really do mean like the first part of this, because I have the Penguin English Classic version of it where it has Little Women and Good Wives all put together. So really technically the big thing that happened in Little Women didn't even happen in Little Women. So I was lied to. I was deceived. However, I still ended up giving this book 5 stars, and I read it for Believathon last year and it was such a great experience reading it. Like, I loved when I read it. I think I stayed up really late, or I think I actually stayed up until very early in the morning to read it. And it was, you know, at the time of reading it, I was enjoying myself, but I never wanted to pick it up again when I put it down. And I think I gave it 5 stars on the pure basis that this is Little Women. And I love the movie adaptations of this book, and I love the story. I love the sister relationship in this book. I just realized I didn't actually say what this book is about, but this is about the March sisters, and they exist. Now I'm trying to remember how this book goes. I mean, it just kind of goes through the relationships of the sisters and their relationship to their mum and different things. Okay, yeah, this definitely doesn't deserve 5 stars from me, but I gave it 5 stars because at the time of reading this, I was loving the reading experience, and I really enjoyed the writing style. I do love me a classic every now and then. It just makes me feel smarter. It makes me feel smarter when I read a classic. Yeah, Little Women definitely didn't deserve 5 stars from me. It probably is a 5-star book to someone else, but it really shouldn't be 5 stars from me, because I can't even remember how to explain it. Next is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Now, I did love this book when I read it, just like Little Women. My experience of reading it was so great. In fact, I think my first ever reading vlog on my BookTube channel was for this book, and it was great. I loved it. Even though I didn't get half of the references, it was still really interesting, and I found myself having a really fun time reading it. Then I read Ready Player 2. That's a kind of sequel that ruins the first book, but with Ready Player 1, I'm now trying to think back on it and remember like why exactly I loved it, and I feel like partly why I loved it so much is because I hadn't really read much sci-fi up to this point, and it just felt like a brand new genre to me, and it got me into reading science fiction. I love the world as well. I love the whole setting of it. Again, oh my god, I didn't even say what this book is about. This follows Wade, and we are in the future. We are in this like dystopian world where everybody uses the Oasis, which is this kind of virtual reality kind of thing that people use. They can play games, they can do loads of stuff, but people use it to escape the real world because the real world is awful, and there is like this quest that Wade has to go on. In fact, everybody in the Oasis goes on to kind of take over from the last owner of the Oasis and become the new owner of it and get all of the riches. I can't stand the characters now. I really do think Ready Player 2 ruined this for me, and I know I shouldn't let it, but it was really hard to read that book and finish it with those expectations for everything to kind of unravel. Maybe this is unfair, and I guess a lot of people probably disagree with this, but it does make me want to bump my rating down for Ready Player One. I wouldn't say this is one of my favourite books of all time, but I would say that I did have fun reading it. Over time, I've kind of lost that initial love for it, and then the sequel came and eliminated that remainder of love. Yeah. Okay, next is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I gave this one 5 stars mainly because, I mean, I'll tell you what it's about. This one is also pretty dystopian, and it is set in Gilead, where women are kind of forced into these roles, and we follow Offred, who is the main character. She is forced to live with this family and breed, and it's this really interesting look at how women are treated, and I loved it when I first read it. I read this way before BookTube, but after I finished uni, and uni ruined a lot of reading experiences for me. I never wanted to pick up a book again after uni, but then I slowly started to get back into reading, and this was one of the ones that I read that really got me back into reading, and I loved it when I read it. I thought it was very well written, and then the Testaments came out, and I hate the Testaments. I think that book just ruined this book entirely, and I know, again, you're supposed to separate those two things, like Handmaid's Tale and the Testaments. You can absolutely separate them. You know, series are allowed to have a shitty sequel, and it shouldn't have to affect your rating of the first book, but it just, that book, The Testaments, just ruined everything. Like, it ruined Gilead, it ruined the characters, it ruined everything, and I don't want to crap on Margaret Atwood because I think she's a phenomenal writer, but that book was, in my opinion, so poorly written that it made me second guess how I felt about The Handmaid's Tale. Now, I haven't reread it, and I probably never will, but yeah, I definitely just gave this one 5 stars because it got me back into reading after uni, and it felt like one of those first books that I could read for pleasure, and that is probably the only reason. Maybe it is still a 5-star read. If I reread it, maybe I'll find that out. Ready Player 2 and The Testaments are 2 god-awful sequels that ruin the originals. And I wanted to do a video on that, but I feel like so far those are the 2 books I can think of that did that. The next 5-star book that I didn't think deserved it is Den of Vipers. I'm joking. I'm honestly joking. Okay, one that it's one of those ones where it's so messed up, and unlike anything else I've read, and I'm going to say that a lot in this video, and that is Off Season by Jack Ketchum, and I feel like the only reason I gave this 5 stars is because it did what it was supposed to do so well. Like, this is all-out horror, and I am terrified of this book. Like, I read it in a night, and it was, you know, pitch dark. It was 4, 5 o'clock in the morning or something when I finished it, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. But I stayed up to read it, and it was terrifying. Not just that experience, but actually the content in here. Like, I wouldn't usually read anything like this either. It's just graphic horror, and there's trigger warnings for so many things, but it essentially follows a writer who goes to this, you know, isolated cabin in the woods, and some friends come. She has a boyfriend who comes, and they surprise her, but they're being watched by cannibals, and these cannibals live in this area. They're kind of notorious, and they decide to attack one night, and from that moment on, but even before that, there's just like some messed up stuff. But from that moment on, I was terrified. And some of the things that it describes, I still think about to this day. Like, and I've mentioned this so many times on my channel, but this is one of those books that have stuck with me because it flat out horrified me. And for that reason, I gave 5 stars. Definitely not a favorite book of all time, but for an effective book, for something that made me feel so repulsed and do what it says on the tin, then it's a 5 stars. But I still wouldn't reread it. I don't think so anyway. Maybe I would. I don't know. Like, I just remember it was around about page 100. Yeah, it was like getting to page 100-ish where things really started to hit the fan. From that moment on, it was non-stop. And I needed it to stop. But it was 5 stars for that reason. So the next book is one that I also think I gave 5 stars because I've never read anything like it, and that is House of Leaves by Marta Danielowski. I have nothing to compare this to. So when I was trying to rate this book, I was like, well, it did what it wanted to do so effectively, and I genuinely did enjoy reading this, and it was so bizarre and outrageous that I was like, it would be a waste if I didn't give this 5 stars. So yeah, definitely not a favourite of mine, but this is, oh my god, it's like told in different formats. We have a main character who finds the diary of a man who has died, and he's reading this, no, it's a report that he's reading, and there are like things in the margin about this report, but it's also about this house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. My memory is shocking, and things are starting to come back to me, and I'm forgetting so much of this because so much is packed into this book, and so much of it is honestly useless. Like, I don't think a lot of it was necessary, but it did pad out this really interesting reading experience, and it just blew my head off. And even now, it's just so difficult to describe what it's about, but it was just bizarre, but in a way that I'm so glad I read it, but also I would never ever read it again. Parts of it did really creep me out. I did enjoy the different styles of writing in this. It made it quite a fast-paced read. Even during the slow parts, where there's just blocks and blocks of text, and you'll get to pages with like 2 lines on it, it felt like a roller coaster, is what it felt like. It just kept going up and down and left and right, and I wasn't sure what I was doing half the time, and I wasn't sure what was happening on the page half the time, but it was so interesting. I was really intrigued by the mysteries of it, and I just think the payoff was really great, especially since you're sitting through this for such a long time, trying to decode so many different things, that it pays off really well. And I would have been so mad if I didn't think it was a good payoff, but there is, and I gave it 5 stars for that reason, but this isn't one of my favourites. This is a 5-star read, whereas the other ones that I've loved are 5-star reads, you know? I've actually got a middle grade, and that's Kikis Delivery Service by Eiko Kodono. You may know this Studio Ghibli film, where Kiki is like this witch, and she can fly this broom, and she has a cat called Gigi, and she goes to this new town to make a name for herself, and she starts up a business where she delivers things for people on her broom. I love this book so much, but I gave it 5 stars, and I don't think it's 5 stars. Like, I think I gave it 5 stars because, one, I'm really nostalgic for the movie, and even though this came first, like, the book came before the movie, but the movie I loved growing up, and it's just such a fantastic movie. And this is just as brilliant as the movie, don't get me wrong. But 2, I think the reason I gave it 5 stars is because of the vibes it gave me. Like, it was cozy, it was warm, it was like a warm hug reading this book, and I just got lost in it. It was cute. I think that's it. Like, it's not in depth. I do love a lot of the descriptions. I love the way that it sets the scene, and I think it has some of the best descriptions I've read in a children's book, but definitely don't think there was enough for me to love it as much as I have my 5-star reads. The way it made me feel is a 5-star, and I think that is valid. I do think it's valid to give something 5 stars just for the way it made you feel, but I know for a fact this isn't a true 5-star. I do think that a lot of it was not developed enough, and some of the characters felt a little bit flat, and things definitely are different to the movie, which is good, but also I feel like some parts of the story the movie does better. But saying that though, this is such a short, cute, and whimsical read. I would definitely reread it just for those warm vibes again. But yeah, this is probably really a 4-star, but I gave it 5 for those reasons. And then another one is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, this one follows an author who is tasked to finish this other author's series off. And this other author is in a coma. And the main character, I can't remember her name, I don't have the book on me to find out what the main character's name is, but the main character goes to her house, she meets her husband and everything, and she ends up finding a diary that belongs to the other author, and it gets pretty sinister from there. It is a thriller, and I barely read thrillers, and I read Verity at the end of last year, so I think I probably only ever read 1 or 2 thrillers in my life at that point, and what it did to me, like, it just, these twists that happen, and it took me, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I started laughing. Because I was like, how dare you do this to me? I had no idea what was going to happen. And I love that experience of reading it again. Like, it's probably not the best thriller ever written, and I'm sure some people don't call it a thriller, but I had such a blast reading it, and the story was so engrossing. Like, I loved the story of the main character author going to the other author's house, and just all of the stuff that happened there. There were so many things that I thought, is this psychological? Is, you know, these things happening? And it had me on the edge of my seat, and I wasn't sure how things were going to progress. And when things progress, it wasn't in a way I was expecting. And have you ever read a book that just made you just burst out laughing because you're just like, what? But like in a good way. Like, it wasn't ridiculous in that sense, but in a good way. I couldn't control my emotions, and it just came to a head. The only reaction that I could do was laugh. Yeah, it's just, the reading experience was just fantastic for me. and it was so fun. It was a really fun time. So yeah, those are the books that I gave 5 stars that probably don't deserve 5 stars, but there might be 5 stars to other people. So if you did give it 5 stars, this isn't me saying that you are wrong, just that I gave these books 5 stars myself, but I don't think I gave them because I think they're the best books. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please leave this video a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment, let me know if you've read any of these and if you gave them 5 stars, or if you have any books that you gave 5 stars that you know are not technically 5 stars. I would love to know. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye.